Phoebe Bridgers, 26-year-old singer-songwriter from LA, probably best known for eating Taco Bell nachos.
$5, no hard choices. The $5 cravings deal, only at Taco Bell.
Just kidding, Phoebe's actually one of the most exciting, if not the most exciting name in indie right now, and I figure it might be cool to take a look at why. Now I'm assuming if you stumbled upon this video, you're like me, you're a Phoebe fan, and you probably also listen to Boy Genius and Better Oblivion. This is just a heads up that we're gonna really go there in this video for two reasons. One, I think the material there is just written fundamentally differently. And so, secondly, I think in that vein, it would kind of just take away from the point of this video, which is like what makes Phoebe Phoebe. So no Better Oblivion, no Boy Genius here, I'm sorry, just solo stuff. Probably the most music theory we're gonna get here is this observation, which is just gradual to little harmonic movement. And what does this really mean? On a more technical level, I found that a lot of tracks made use of 1 and 6. If you're not familiar with what these numbers mean, just know that there are a certain amount of notes in a scale, and each note in the scale is labeled with a Roman numeral 1 through 7 really. So when I say that, I'm just referring to chords built on a certain tone in a scale. That's all you need to know. So yeah, a lot of songs use 1 and 6 back to back. And what's interesting about that is that, while yes, the numbers 1 and 6 are pretty far apart, the notes that 1 and 6 share are actually pretty similar. So when you use them back to back, like Phoebe does, it doesn't actually create a lot of harmonic movement in a song. Basically, harmony is most, if not all the time, set by guitar chords here, and they're just meant to keep a sturdy bass and a tempo and a mood for the overall song. This is done in purposeful contrast so that Phoebe can have a lot of melodic freedom, because we know she has a pretty amazing range, and so if she were to traverse that whole range while there were a bunch of complicated things going on with the harmony, it would kind of be too much. So we kind of keep the harmony basic here, or slow moving, gradual, however you'd like to say it, just so that Phoebe can do whatever she pleases melodically and it's not overwhelming. And I think Smoke Signals is actually the perfect first example of this, and the first track on Stranger. Something to keep in mind with Phoebe's stuff is that it kind of all falls under the umbrella of singer-songwriter material. Now, what does that mean? Well, it's just basically that a lot of these songs, you can tell, are written by guitar for guitar, and they're very easy to play while singing. That's the whole goal, is to not let any of the structure elements or music theory elements of the song get in the way of the songwriter being able to play them solo. This means you're using a lot of open chords, stuff that isn't super tricky for your hands to get around, and as a result of that, you're using a capo a lot of the time. But this also frees up another thing that you can do, which is use slash chords to kind of craft your own stepwise bass line. Now, what are slash chords? Well, if you're like me and you go on Ultimate Guitar to look up how to play stuff, you might see something like, I don't know, G over A, G/A, and you're like, what do I do? It's really easy. G over A is just a G chord with the A note in the bass, or the lowest voicing. So specifying the bass note like that allows you to kind of use your progression that you wrote to kind of craft, like I said, a very stepwise bass line that you can kind of use as a grounding element of a song. And this kind of plays into singer-songwriter stuff, right? If you're gonna play these songs solo and you don't have a bass player, all these slash chords kind of create a bass line for you, and it feels like there's some sort of bass element carrying the song when you play it. And in fact, on Scott Street, this is exactly what happens. You have a G over A that goes to a G over B and goes to a C sus2 chord in the middle of the progression. And if you're keeping track, that's a nice bass line from A to B to C.
Asked you how it's playing drums. Said it's too much stuff to carry.
Another thing Smoke Signals and Scott Street both do, along with a lot of other Phoebe tracks, are make use of dialogue to tell a story, specifically the phrase, "you said." On Scott Street you have, "I asked you how I was playing drums." "You said it's too much shit to carry." On Smoke Signals you have, "You said that song will creep you out till you're dead." And on Motion Sickness you have, "You said when you met me, you were bored." In fact, a lot of the material tends to think about interrelational experiences and how that reflects on Phoebe's psyche and life philosophy. So it makes a lot of sense that she holds on to a lot of things that are said in conversation and kind of mulls over them and thinks about what they could mean for her and that other person. And I think just saying even the words you said kind of like makes it a lot more accessible, because I feel like a lot of people are intimidated by, you know, maybe trying to write a song or something like that because they feel it needs to be like poetry and full of metaphors all the time and stuff. But here Phoebe is just being like, you said this and I felt like this. And I think it's a cool element to bring in for some realism and accessibility, like I said. Okay, and just one more thing before I leave LP1 here. Conor Oberst once said in a Better Oblivion interview something about Phoebe's voice that I thought was very true, and I thought about it a little bit, but basically he said this.
It's like, you know, when you hear a voice that it's like simultaneously like something like new and unique, but it also feels like an old friend or something, you know, you're like, oh, that thing that I've been waiting for.
Thanks, buddy.
You know?
And if you let me be a nerd for a minute about this, I think I can explain what Conor meant. I'm gonna use Georgia to do this. Back in 2014, Phoebe sung Georgia like this.
Georgia, Georgia, I love your son. But when he gets older, he might be the one. He might be the one.
And that's definitely more like of a Hayley Williams take on vocals, and there's nothing wrong with that performance. It's just a totally different style than what she does now, obviously. But you know, you have a lot of power in that performance, and that usually resides in the 1 to 2K range if we're talking about like frequencies and hertz here. So the 1 to 2K range, that's where a lot of the meat of that vocal lies.
When he gets older, he might be the one. He might be the one.
But in 2017, this is how Phoebe sung Georgia.
Georgia, Georgia, I love your son. When he gets older, he might be the one. He might be the one.
And at this pace session, I think like, first of all, their microphone is kind of like over accentuating these frequencies that I'm about to talk about, but that's besides the point. At this pace session, I think you can kind of really notice the difference here and where the emphasis lies in Phoebe's voice. So you have like a nice rounded body in her voice around 400 hertz. And then in around the 8K range, Phoebe has some energy there that kind of adds like a texture to her voice that I can't explain, like an airiness. And it kind of makes it feel like, I don't know, calming and familiar. In my nerdy audio engineering opinion, this is kind of the Phoebe secret sauce. And I think this is what would make Conor say something like he did.
When he gets older, he might be the one. He might be the one.
So moving right on into Punisher. Now I think it makes more sense to talk less about music theory things in Punisher, because honestly a lot of the stuff we just talked about in Stranger carries over and Phoebe kind of just doubles down on it. In fact, I think you can view Punisher as like acknowledging everything that was great about Stranger and doubling down on it and exploring it more. And I think it's even true for the opener, like, no, not DVD intro. I know it's technically the opener, but I mean like the start of like the lyrical content. Garden Song, I think Garden Song is like kind of a spiritual successor to Smoke Signals in a way, in a lot of the things that it does. On Garden Song, you'll see everything we talked about so far. You have a simple harmonic part written on guitar with use of 1 and 6. You have slash chords that make a nice bass line, and you have a very melodic melody where Phoebe traverses a lot of her range. I think that melody is made even sweeter by the baritone voice that sits underneath Phoebe's and kind of just doubles her part. It actually sounds really full and really beautiful. Huge fan of it. And nothing music theory related here in this next thing, but just one of my favorite lyrics from Phoebe across the entire 2 LPs is on here, and it goes like this.
And when I grow up, I'm gonna look up from my phone and see my life, and it's gonna be just like my recurring dream where I'm at the movies, but I don't remember what I'm seeing. The screen turns into a tidal wave. Then it's a dorm room, like a hedge maze. And when I find you, you touch my leg and I insist.
Now you're probably thinking, wow, we got this far and we didn't talk about Motion Sickness or Kyoto. And that's because I want to talk about them together, because I think it describes Phoebe's approach to drums pretty well. 9 times out of 10, a lot of the songs across Stranger and Punisher use drums orchestrally. What do I mean by this? Well, just not traditional like front to back drum beat going the whole time type of thing, more just like reactionary to a lyric or a climactic moment, or just kind of really matching the energy of the song. Because like we talked about before, a lot of the stuff is singer-songwriter, all the stuff is singer-songwriter, right? Playing these songs solo sounds very comparable to playing them live with a band, because the guitar is often the one keeping the tempo, not necessarily some kind of drum beat. And I guess the other orchestral element of it is that, you know, you have things that aren't traditionally drums, a lot of like extraneous percussion sometimes, and it's just a very different approach to percussion is what I'm trying to say. The only 2 songs with straight drum beats through them, like I said, are Kyoto and Motion Sickness. And Kyoto's funny too because it's such a banger, yet it barely moves harmonically. You have a 1-4, but you're using slash chords to keep a nice bass line. Same thing in the chorus, even when it opens up. Kyoto rocks, but it definitely does not roll. I'm sorry, I wrote that in, I thought it was funny. This is a perfect transition to the last thing I want to talk about, which is the fact that Phoebe uses these orchestral drums to create orchestral builds. And what do I mean by this? Well, we can look at the tracks we just looked at to kind of figure that out, right? Smoke Signal starts off with that melancholy, slow, like solo guitar, and then kind of opens up by the end with that sweeping string section that really sells the tragedy of the material on the track. Scott Street again starts out with just that guitar and then adds drums after a line about drums. That's pretty like reactionary and orchestral if you ask me. And then by the end you have like all this miscellaneous percussion, all these like background vocal lines to really sell the outro, and kind of the outro is the climax of the song, which is a weird thing to say, but it's kind of true. Kyoto's last chorus even has those triumphant horns and it's just this big beautiful moment, but at the beginning like it's not nearly matching that energy. It's all a slow build to that moment. And while I know the end is probably the perfect example that you're thinking of when I'm talking about this, and I agree, I think my personal favorite example of some build like this is in Chinese Satellite. I think it's just the way that it does it. You know how everything just drops out and it's only the vocals carrying it for a little bit, and everything comes whooshing back in with all these layers and the drums and everything. Like, it just feels like it could be the background to like a Disney princess movie trailer, but like in the best way.
Sometimes when I can't sleep, it's just a matter of time before I'm hearing things. Swore I could feel you through the walls, but that's impossible. I want to believe that if I go outside I'll see a tractor beam coming to take me to where I'm from. I want to go home.
Not for nothing, but this is all possible because of that first thing we talked about, right? Simple harmony. If we had complex harmony and we had these cool arrangements going on all over the place and then a melody that was like traversing an insane range, it would be like overwhelming. It would be too much. There's a formula here that works. Simple harmony that creates simple bass lines, super melodic lines that kind of traverse a wide range and have a super unique texture, orchestral drums, and orchestral arrangements and builds. Mix all of that with some of the most accessible, picturesque writing around, and you have exactly one
$5 cravings deal, only at Taco Bell.
Phoebe Bridgers. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Most importantly, music theory nerds, if you have something to correct about this video, please let me know. I'm not great at it, but this is my best shot. And yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.